Hi everyone. Thank you for joining me. I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy in this crazy, crazy time. This is my first webinar, so please be gentle. My name's Kate Farnsworth, and this is DIY Diabetes, Past, Present, and Future. Today I'll be sharing a little bit about my family's story, how we found DIY diabetes solutions, how they have evolved, how we incorporate them into our lives, and some things I think we have to look forward to in the future. My daughter, Sydney, is the oldest of 4 daughters. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 8. Diabetes came into our lives like an unwelcome guest. We didn't invite it into our home, to our meals, activities, or ask for its sleepless nights. At diagnosis, we were given a vial of insulin and some syringes and sent on our way. Sydney hated every shot, and so we very quickly looked for another solution to get insulin into her little body and keep her alive. Sydney chose the pink Animas Ping pump. The only deciding factor was its color. She didn't care about any other features. The pump was a welcome change from injections, and life became a little bit easier. We realized early on that CGMs were a game changer in diabetes management. Instead of seeing a still picture of what was happening with Sydney's blood glucose, we were able to see whether she was heading high or low in real time. And we even got to stop setting an alarm at night and sleep through the night on occasion. Which was awesome. Sorry. Sydney was a bookworm and at a phase in her life where she just wanted diabetes to be invisible and to not stand out in any way. When that Dexcom would alarm, she would silence it as quickly as possible and shove it in her pocket. When she came home, my first question was, "What's your number?" And I would follow it by checking that Dexcom receiver and seeing that she had not checked it all day. She had ignored it. And there was no way for me to see her numbers from home. Dexcom Share didn't exist at the time. So I searched for a way to find a way for me to see what was going on without her with me. So John Kostick had been struggling with the same problem with his son, Evan, and he came up with a way to connect a Android phone and connect it with a wire to a Dexcom receiver. And he shared this system with Lane Desborough and Ross Naylor, who combined it with their NIGHTSCOUT software and shared it on GitHub for everyone and anyone who wanted it. And then Jason Adams created the Facebook group called CGM in the Cloud to help people come together and set up their NIGHTSCOUT sites. The hashtag We Are Not Waiting was born at a Diabetes Mind D-Data meeting. It was the clarion call for people living with diabetes. We're not waiting for access to our own health data. We're not waiting for commercial solutions. We're not waiting for our children to be safe. We're not waiting for a good night's sleep. For us, NIGHTSCOUT was a dream come true. It was free, and all they asked was that you pay it forward. I paid it forward in every way I could. I helped countless other families set up NIGHTSCOUT and made a watch face that Sydney could see her numbers on discreetly. This changed the way we manage diabetes. Instead of asking, "What's your number?" when she came home, I could say, "How was your day?" She and I were able to deal with diabetes in real time, and without fear or judgment from me. It changed our relationship, but the tools were still lacking. Her insulin pump and her CGM were like 2 of her sisters. They lived in close proximity, but they weren't speaking to each other. The problem was that her insulin pump was acting like a car with cruise control on. It gave insulin no matter what level her blood glucose was at. She could be heading low and the pump kept giving the same amount of insulin. The next evolution of DIY diabetes innovation came when Ben West reverse engineered communications with the older Medtronic pumps, which was then used by Scott Lebrand and Dana Lewis for OpenAPS. Meanwhile, Pete Schwam had created the Riley link to bridge communications between the older Medtronic pumps as well. And Nate Ratcliffe created what would then become the Loop app. You take an algorithm, a computer the size of a Tic Tac box, and an old Medtronic pump, and now it has the ability to adjust your basal insulin based on your CGM. It took years of work to create this technology. It wasn't tested in a clinic. It wasn't created by a large corporation. It was created by people living with diabetes and their family members who decided that they were not waiting for someone else to do it for them. Created by people touched by diabetes for people touched by diabetes. One of the wonderful things about this technology is that it can evolve at a faster pace because it's constantly being tested and approved upon by the people who actually use the systems themselves. So the closed loop solution reads CGM values and adjusts basal insulin to prevent hypo and hyperglycemia, kind of like a car with adaptive cruise control, so it slows down when it sees an obstacle. It's been said that living with diabetes is like walking a tightrope 24/7, trying to keep your blood sugar low, but not too low. You must balance on this rope while juggling all the things that can affect blood sugar, like food, exercise, medication, alcohol, what color shorts you wore today. But what if there was a way to allow people living with diabetes to operate on more solid ground, to worry about their footing a little less, so that they could focus on all the other things in their lives instead of just putting one foot in front of another on that tiny rope? For us, that was what Loop gave us. After closing the loop and getting used to not micromanaging diabetes anymore, the first thing we got back was sleep. Well, I knew I was getting up a lot to treat Sydney's blood sugar in the middle of the night. I didn't realize the huge impact that was having on her mental health and well-being as well. With sleep, we were all able to be more productive, exercise more, and our whole quality of life improved. This impact was felt on our entire family. We talked about diabetes way less. Sydney is able to live her life more like a normal teenager, and diabetes doesn't take all of her focus. Now she can focus on being a kid. Her A1C improved, but that was really sort of an added benefit to the whole system. Closed loop systems have evolved from over on the left, where they used to just turn off if low glucose was already, like if your glucose was already low, and then they evolved to turning off when they predicted low blood glucose, and then adjusting for high blood glucose as well. The DIY closed loop solutions are within the second generation here. Most automate basal delivery, but requires some meal dosing. Some people are able to set their systems to dose for meals without bolusing, but results for that vary, and they have to have a little bit of a higher tolerance typically for excursions in blood sugar, like going high after a meal. There are 3 major DIY systems available. All are open source and are available for anyone who wants them. The major differences to the systems being the devices they use for the algorithm, so phone, etc., and which pumps they operate on. If you're set in your phone choice, then your system options are more limited. If you're open to different pumps or phones, then you have more options. So start with the phone or pump and then decide which system is right for you. OpenAPS is perhaps the most well-known, but it's not necessarily the most popular currently based on pump selection and availability. Many people find Loop is easier to set up. Android APS is less common here because the devices it works on are not available in Canada currently. I'm going to speak about some of the DIY solutions that are currently available, and then I'll go into a deeper dive into Loop, since it's the most common DIY closed loop solution. So NIGHTSCOUT evolved from those initial wired rigs that John Kostick came up with to working with Dexcom or Medtronic systems with real-time data. And it's a great tool for retrospective diabetes analysis as well. NIGHTSCOUT in its current form is a website that you create, and it shows your CGM data, and it can be viewed remotely by as many people as you like on as many devices as you like. So it's not limited like a Dexcom share to 5 people. It shows glucose data and the arrow direction glucose is heading, the change in blood glucose over the last 5 minutes. It shows boluses and basal if you enter them or if you're looping. And it lets you scroll back 2 days on the main screen so you can see what might have happened over those 2 days. NIGHTSCOUT has really good reports, and it's one of the key features that we use. You can see the amount of carbs consumed, the effect those had on glucose levels. This person is looping, so you can see how much positive and negative basal was given on the right-hand side, given or cut back based on their usual basal settings. So 5.4 units above their basal and 10.8 below. This is the report that we take to our endocrinologist so she can make setting adjustment suggestions. We usually take 1 week of this report. And I like this report because you can see day to day what might need to be changed. So if I see a rise at 8 a.m. every morning, then Sydney and I might talk about whether or not her basal needs an increase, or you know, she can look at it and see if she's not coming down after a meal repeatedly, that something else might need changing. Glucose distribution is a really helpful report. It can show A1C prediction if you run it for 90 days, and it shows percentage of lows and highs. We find the prediction is within 0.1 or 0.2 of lab tests, so it's pretty accurate. Our endocrinologist likes under 3% lows, so she wouldn't be too happy with this report, but the A1C looks pretty good, so maybe she wouldn't complain. NIGHTSCOUT has a CAREPORTAL feature that's really helpful, especially for caregivers, so that they can enter treatments into CAREPORTAL and you can look back on it. And it can be seen by other caregivers immediately. Say you're in a situation where someone else is taking care of your child, you see in NIGHTSCOUT their levels are dropping, but a carb entry pops up, so you know the caregiver has responded to the situation without having to call and interrupt them. There are lots of other things you can log: exercise, CGM start. So we log Sydney's CGM and pump site changes, etc. in here. Spike is a Dexcom or Libre with Meow Meow replacement app. It's an iPhone application. It allows remote monitoring as well. You can send values to Dexcom Follow if you want. It has custom alarms, Sydney likes the fact that it doesn't have a mandatory alarm for 3.1 because she likes to turn that off. One of the really neat features of Spike is that it can speak glucose readings to you. This is helpful for people with vision impairment, but also people who are unable to glance at their watch or their phone during exercise. It can actually say the readings to you out loud. XStrip is similar to Spike. You would use it in place of the Dexcom app and can use it with Meow Meow and Libre, etc. It can also send to Dexcom Follow and NIGHTSCOUT and provides many of the same features that Spike does. For Dexcom G5 users, you can get raw sensor data and extend your transmitter wear, and there's no 2-hour warm-up as well. So now I'll go into a bit of a deep dive on Loop. Loop is a do-it-yourself hybrid closed loop system. It uses older Medtronic pumps or Omnipod, a Riley Link, a CGM, and an iPhone app, and that little white box in the picture. The code is built using a Mac computer and an application called Xcode. Generally, you use your computer. You can use an Apple computer or a PC running Mac OS. You download some code from GitHub. You add a developer account to Xcode. It's optional, but it's highly recommended. If you don't have an Apple developer account, you have to rebuild every week. It is $100, so if that is $100 a year. So if that is something that's too much, then you can definitely do it without. It's just easier if you do have the Apple developer account. And then you plug your phone into your computer and press build, and the app builds on your iPhone. It's really critical that you do this process yourself. You need to know how things work in case anything ever goes wrong, and how to troubleshoot those things. We've had situations where someone dropped their phone in a toilet and didn't know how to build the app because someone else had done it for them. So then they're stuck without Loop for however long until they find someone else to help them or build it themselves. And then you enter your settings from your system into your Loop app. Loop Docs is, Katie DeSimone has done a fantastic job building this. Anything you need to know about Loop is in here. Any questions you might have, all the documentation on how to build Loop, it's all found here. All the troubleshooting, everything. So go to Loop Docs before you go anywhere else, and most of the answers you need will be there. So Loop uses your settings, insulin duration, sensitivity, carb ratio, and then it calculates how much net insulin on board you have, and it uses that information to calculate what your blood glucose will be eventually. It then takes action based on that eventual blood glucose, increasing basal insulin or high temping for a rise, and decreasing basal insulin or low temping for to prevent a drop. The app on your iPhone acts as a remote control for your pump. So it would, with Omnipod, it would replace the PDM, and with Medtronic, it just is a remote control for the pump. You no longer enter basal and carbs into your pump at all. Loop then calculates how much it expects your blood sugar to rise or fall and compares it to what actually is happening. And then if the rise or fall is more or less than it expects, it will make adjustments by high temping or low temping to prevent those outcomes and keep you in the range that you have set for yourself. Now there are versions of Loop that also include micro boluses instead of temp basals. So they would give tiny boluses to prevent highs and temp basals to prevent lows. So here you can see a 45-gram bolus for cereal, and Loop has initially, the blue bar at the top is the basal insulin being adjusted. It's initially cutting back because it sees a drop, but then as blood sugar starts rising in the prediction, the purple prediction line starts going higher, it increases basal. Some of the neat features of Loop is the ability to set a remote, and you can do it from the phone too, but overrides for your system. So you can remotely tell the system to have a higher or lower target. You can set an override that overrides insulin sensitivity, basal, and carb ratio all together as a percentage to make it more or less aggressive. And then you can set it for a defined amount of time, like 2 hours, or you can set it to run unlimited until you turn it off. Some people use higher targets for exercise. So say you usually go into exercise at a 7, you could set it to 9 so that you have less active insulin going when you go into exercise. And some people use a lower target before meals instead of a pre-bolus. Like Sydney can't remember to pre-bolus. So we have it automatically set so that her system targets 3.9 for an hour before lunch. So it just gets a little bit of active insulin going before she eats her lunch at school. Doesn't apply now because we eat whenever we want. If this then math is a more advanced feature that's available, you can set targets with one button. So you can see here on my iPhone, you can hit eating soon, so targeting that 3.9, or workout mode, so maybe a higher target with less insulin. You can log site changes or schedule items, and then there's also Alexa integration. Let's see if this will work. So you can see there that gray bar is the workout mode being triggered. We use that, so it's a higher target. We use that also for like eating soon. If I'm cooking dinner in the kitchen, I can say, you know, Alexa, trigger eating soon, and it'll set her system to give her a bit more insulin before dinner. Or she can set it for whatever reasons she wants as well. This one is a big one in our family because you can set an override using the geolocation on your iPhone. So when you arrive at a certain place, you have a certain action that happens. For us, we use it for snowboarding. So when we arrive at the mountain, it automatically sets her system to give her less insulin and gives her a higher target, so that by the time she's got all her gear on and is on the hill, she's got way less active insulin, and it helps prevent lows while she's out there snowboarding. You could set it for anywhere though. You could set it for school if you rise when you go to school, or you know, every time you arrive at the gym, you could set it to whatever you want to do. This one, alarms with an alarm, overrides with an alarm trigger, is helpful when, so a lot of people experience a rise as soon as they wake up in the morning. Sydney, every time her alarm goes off for school, her blood sugar starts rising. So we can set it so that every time her alarm goes off, it automatically gives her extra insulin. And then it only happens when your alarm goes off. So, you know, if you're not setting your alarm for Saturday and Sunday, then you're not getting that extra insulin when you don't need it. You could set it for any alarm, but that's the way we use it. This one is, so when you use your Apple Watch, you can select a workout, and whenever you select a workout, it'll pop up and ask you if you also want less insulin for that time or more, depending on whatever your workout is and your workout needs. it is helpful for people who exercise. We're not making a lot of use of this right now, but it is a helpful one for sure. So I'm asked often why people choose DIY solutions instead of what is available. I think that there are definite bonuses to the way that DIY solutions are able to faster make changes. They don't have to be clinically tested. They don't have to go through the approval process, which is very slow. You know, there are pros and cons of that. Obviously, there is risk associated with not testing systems, but I have to say that these systems have been used for more hours than any clinical trial. So at this point, I feel very confident in them, but it is always a risk when you're doing things on your own. They are using approved devices. So Medtronic pump and Omnipod are approved devices. They're just being used with algorithms that are not approved. So sometimes that helps physicians with the, you know, being okay with you using these systems. The community support is huge. We, sometimes people don't get a lot of support for this from their physicians, but the online peer community is really, really strong, and people enjoy coming together with a common purpose. And then not every device is right for every person. So DIY solutions allow us to use different devices with different CGMs. Maybe, you know, Medtronic, maybe you don't like the Medtronic CGM, you can use the Dexcom CGM with the Medtronic pump, etc. One solution doesn't fit everybody. So when we finished getting Sydney set up, I thought there should be a resource for other families who wanted to use these systems, but were overwhelmed with the technical terms or were afraid to try it themselves. There were about 100 families looping when I started the looped group. Well, the idea took off, it seems, because we're just about to let in our 22,000th person. It started as the 1% of the 1% of diabetes management, but now there are patients, there are spouses, there are parents, diabetes educators, endocrinologists, and more making up the group. So DIY doesn't mean do it alone, it means do it yourself. As far as the future is concerned, to be honest, my hope is that the commercial options one day will surpass what we've been able to do with the DIY solutions. I'd love to be able to say that the DIY community once innovated and inspired the options available. Full disclosure, I work for Beta Bionics, and I hope that the iLet relieves a lot of the burden that many families experience. Until then, there will be new developments on hardware we use. People are working on alternatives to the Riley link. Hopefully costs can come down on some of those devices, because I know that's a stumbling block for many families. There will be more pumps that are supported and additional features like remote bolusing. It's currently available with Android APS, but people are working on it for Loop as well. There is exciting research happening with the DIY diabetes community, and we can look forward to those results. I'm working on some research as well, so I'm excited about that. Tidepool is working on bringing a version of Loop to the US App Store. So hopefully that will be available to Canadians as well. Dexcom's working on smaller CGMs with longer wear. As cell phones evolve and their user customizable automations evolve, it's my hope that we'll be able to automate a lot more of the diabetes management, like automatically changing your settings based on what time of month it is, or adjusting your insulin sensitivity when your heart rate is elevated. I think we're just getting started with some of these amazing diabetes solutions, so it's a pretty exciting time. I talked really fast, but thank you everyone so much for taking part in this webinar. I hope you've learned something and you've been inspired to look into some of the DIY diabetes solutions for yourself. If anybody has any questions, let me know.
Yes, so Kate, I've got questions in the chat box, in the Q&A box for you. So we will get rolling. If you are using an old pump to loop, if something goes wrong, i.e. bad battery cap, belt clip, etc., do you need to hide what you are doing when talking to the pump manufacturer? Do they still sell parts? Will the pump company still sell parts for these old pumps to help in small repairs?
Yes, they do still sell pump clips and caps. I don't ever encourage anybody to lie. I would say that not disclosing is probably your best way of going. Medtronic specifically recalled the pumps that we use because they didn't want them used for this purpose. So they would try and encourage you to hand your pump in to be refurbished. And the pump that you would get back is not one that would be loopable. So don't tell, I guess is my advice, if you can avoid it, just because it's not something that they're going to support. With Omnipod, my advice always for failed pods while looping is to not ask for replacements for those pods, because you're using a system that it's not the way it's designed to use, and I think it's unfair to ask Omnipod to warranty those pods. I mean, if one fell off because you knocked it off or something and that's within their warranty, then that's fine. But I think that when you assume a DIY solution, you do have to assume some of those losses as well.
Okay. This person has been looping for a year, but they've never been able to get the insulin portion of NIGHTSCOUT working. Where is the best place to go for that kind of assistance?
CGM in the cloud is a good place, or you can ask in Loop and tag me, and then I can help you with that.
Have you used the AutoTune website to check your settings on Loop, or do you just adjust your Loop settings?
I have used AutoTune. I have found that it does not work well for Sydney and Sydney's diabetes. Many people are really happy with it. So it is something to try if you're really struggling with your settings. At this point, I've gotten pretty good at looking at settings and just knowing what needs to be changed. So we don't use that ourselves, but it is a tool that's available if you want to try it. I would just always, with anything, be cautious about making any changes, and use common sense. If it's completely different than what your settings are right now, then maybe you don't want to make all those settings changes at once.
Okay. Does looping cause a lot of battery drain on your phone?
No. Sydney's using an iPhone 6S with 0 battery. So it's always dying, but it doesn't make your phone drain that quickly, but it does make your pump battery die very quickly. So you'll have to change that quite frequently, like every few days, basically.
Okay. Is the geolocation part of the Alexa an add-on? I imagine the info on how to add that capability is in Loop Docs.
It is not. It is. I did some blog posts about it. I can send a link later with those blog posts. So the Alexa portion is in the NIGHTSCOUT docs. Actually, it might be in the Loop docs as well. The geolocation portion specifically is in my blog. So I will send out a link for that.
Okay. Do you think in terms of using looping systems that there's any hope for those of us who cannot get reliable readings from any of the current CGM systems due to overactive immune responses, etc., too much noise? Might it be made to work with trends rather than the individual, wildly incorrect 5-minute readings?
That's a really good question. I do think that looping, even with jumpier readings, it sort of evens out in the end a little bit, but the way it's currently designed, it really does rely on those 5-minute readings. So I hope that's a way of the future. I also hope that the newer CGMs will work with more body chemistries, because I know that a lot of them currently aren't good solutions for that. But I'm not sure on that one.
Okay. Is NIGHTSCOUT / X-Drip still beneficial for MDI?
Sorry. Is NIGHTSCOUT or X-Drip? Yes. So NIGHTSCOUT is helpful for logging any entries, especially if you're managing someone else's diabetes. It won't give you the same insulin views for basal, but you could still log boluses. I know, and a lot of families use that for MDI, so they can see what boluses were given, what carbs were given, what treatments were given, and then they can use that CGM data to make decisions or changes later on.
Okay. We're using version 1.10.1 for Spike. Curious if the event overrides you spoke of are available in this version. I have an IFTT NIGHTSCOUT remote as an override, but don't see where I can put it in the events like travel activity that you showed on the screen.
So what I showed on the screen was NIGHTSCOUT, not Spike, for the IFTTT overrides. So if you need those, then you will have to update your NIGHTSCOUT site. I can help with that later too. Okay.
This is a good review for those using a pump and looking forward to using a more advanced method for control. For us MDI people using Libre or Dexcom, is there any suggestions? I've had very good success using Dexcom and an app called SugarMate with an Apple Watch.
Yeah, so I used to have SugarMate in this presentation because I think it's a really good application, but it's just not as much in the DIY sphere as some of the other solutions. So I actually removed it for this presentation. I think it's a really good solution, and it has most of the features that I think would be valuable for people. And it has good alarms on your phone, and an Apple Watch integration, which is sadly lacking from the Dexcom Follow app for any of us. But I'm not sure that there are huge advantages to have. The nice thing about NIGHTSCOUT is it's a site that anybody can pull up anywhere. If that's something you're looking for, you can use both together. It's fine.
Okay. Kate, can you briefly name the reports from NIGHTSCOUT that you would bring for Sydney's endo appointments?
Yes, I use the day-to-day report, week of that, and then I use the distribution report, 90 days.
Okay. Any plans on integrating Loop, OpenAPS with heart rate monitors like Whoop or Aura Ring? I probably said that Aura wrong.
Did Mike Riddell ask that question?
No, he didn't.
Okay. Yes, heart rate is something that is looked at, but it is a little bit tricky because sometimes your heart rate can elevate without actually being active in exercise. So there are a bunch of factors that need to be taken into consideration with that, because if you had a nightmare and your heart rate just like got really fast, you might not want extra insulin for that. But if you're exercising, you might. So yes, definitely people are looking at integrating heart rate data into Loop systems.
Have any of the pump and CGM companies ever approached folks who were doing the do-it-yourself thing and incorporated their algorithms? In other words, could we all join together to make everything better?
Yes, some pump companies have been very open to collaboration. The Dana R people have been very open to integrating with Android APS. Some of the other CGMs, but not the bigger ones. They haven't really offered collaboration as much. But I think it's always something that we should continue to have discussions with the manufacturers of every device and say, this is something that we're looking for. We want them all to work together. We want options. We want interoperability of devices because, you know, Sydney tried the Libre and it didn't work for her, and Dexcom does, but lots of people find the reverse is true for them. So a system that allows you to choose your CGM and choose your algorithm and choose your device would be ideal. And I think we just need to keep asking. Everybody needs to keep asking every time you call one of your device manufacturers about.
Does X-Strip work on iPhone or only Android?
Only Android. Spike is the version for Apple.
Comparing CGMs of Dexcom app versus Spike app, do they both feed the Loop app just as quickly?
Yes. Okay. There are, so Spike used to be what we use. We don't use it anymore. We found that it was, with the newer versions of iOS, it was, there were more connection issues. So it feeds the information in more, but we were getting more difficulty with communications, and Spike hasn't been updated in a little while, and the iPhone keeps updating. So I think there's just a discrepancy between the two updates that needs to get worked
out. So this one, I don't know if you can definitively answer, but you can maybe point them in the right direction. Is looping safe to use during pregnancy? Do you know of any blogs or resources that I can read up further on this?
Well, I can't say definitively whether it is safe or not, but I can tell you that we have a group of for pregnancy and looping. So many people are doing it, and we've had lots of looping babies, even a set of twins or two. So definitely not something to scare you away from it.
Thanks for the talk. How invasive is the code for the new loopers? I have no clue what the rest of this means. Is it C++, Python, React native based code?
So the code is written in Swift for the most part, because it's Apple. So you really don't need to know any programming whatsoever. You really need to be able to follow directions. It's like building a recipe. So the more closely you can follow the steps, the better your outcome will be. And you can't mess it up and have loop come out wrong. It just won't build. It's not like you can you know, make the end result not work correctly. It's just, it might not build at all if you don't do it correctly. So no programming language is needed to know how to build.
Great. What is a common issue you see across all DIY systems that you would like to see change?
Oh no. I would like people to be patient with changes on their settings and not change everything all at once. But I think it's really important on all DIY systems and all systems in general to test your settings before you start. So knowing what your actual basal is before going into it, and knowing how much 1 unit of insulin lowers you. We're all used to using these systems with 3-hour insulin durations, but in truth, insulin lasts 5 to 6 hours in your body. So we've been gaming the system all along. So all of the settings in traditional pumps are sort of wrong. And we need to go back to the drawing board and assess like actually what the numbers are for us over 6 hours to make, just to start out well. So I would like everybody to do that before they start looping.
Is NIGHTSCOUT your main tool to adjust fine-tune settings? Do you ever use the nature of temp basals to do that?
So I'm not sure I understand that question really.
Yeah, because the second part's different. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so we do use NIGHTSCOUT primarily for our fine tuning, to make decisions on what changes need to be made. But then the system itself uses temp basal to make adjustments, and we can see on NIGHTSCOUT what, like, if it's cut insulin a lot, maybe we need to make basals less aggressive or whatever, you know, like we can use that information to make decisions.
Are there any face-to-face looping groups to learn from, COVID times accepted, for building, but also just listening to other people's experience?
Like Zoom meetings, kind of. We can set them up. There are face-to-face meetings all over the world. COVID's a little tricky, but there are Zoom meetings that are happening, and we can set them up anytime to help each other out or hold hands if we want to virtually. But the looped group is really good for any questions that you have that come up.
What is the oldest version of an Apple computer that you would need to set up looping? And same question for an Apple Watch.
I have to look it up for the Apple computer. Basically, you want it running at least Mojave, but I'm not sure off the top of my head what version that is. It is in the loop docs. And Apple Watch, any version will work, but version 1 is starting to get phased out.
Okay. Is there anyone crafting DIY NFC readers to replace the sometimes unreliable Meow Meow or BlueCon systems?
Not to my knowledge, but Meow Meow is from the people I speak to more reliable than BlueCon.
If using G6, pros and cons of looping versus Tandem's new software.
So right now, Tandem software in Canada only is basal IQ, so it's only doing a predictive low glucose suspend. It doesn't touch highs. The control IQ solution that will come will address those. Yeah. So right now, looping would give you a more balanced, like push and pull on blood sugars to try and keep them in range. Down the road, you know, many people are happy with Tandem solutions. So we haven't used it ourselves, but it would be the commercial solution right now that I would choose if we were going to choose one.
And someone, I just noticed in the chat box, someone has just put the link in to get how to get right to the loop docs.
Awesome.
For
basal, I have it on the next screen.
Okay, great. For basal testing, for basal and setting, sorry, let me reread this. Okay, so it's often said that before you get into looping to make sure you're confident basically in your basal. So how do you do this? It is confusing as it does not say when you should turn off loop, so it won't affect the results as insulin stays active for 4 hours.
Yeah, it actually stays active for 5 to 6 with that tail. But the best way to test basals is to turn open loop and fast. If you can test different stretches with no food as a or exercise, hopefully, you know, kind of be a sloth for a little while and just see that those basals are flat, then that's really the ideal way to do it. You have to do it in little chunks, maybe. So you can't do it like Sydney would not agree to 12-hour fast or anything like that. But, you know, when she sleeps in, we can see that whether or not her basal is rising without food and things like that.
Okay. So this is the last question that I have in the chat box. We only have a couple of minutes left. So if anyone has any lingering questions, please make sure you get them in there. Kate, I shudder to think what the answer to this question is. Approximately how many hours have you donated to people like us to help us set up and troubleshoot a DIY system?
I have no idea. 5 years. 5 years. It's been my full-time volunteer job, so let's put it that way. A lot of hours.
No kidding.
But I get more out of it than I give, so that's good.
Okay. I know many people are happy with the Tandem Control IQ, so we could have some people from the US on this webinar as well. Do you think the support for Loop will become less when there are more people making that switch, or just when these other solutions become available?
I don't know about support, but I do know, Katie DeSimone's daughter is using the Control IQ now. So the more people that make the switch, the maybe less we have people testing the DIY solutions. I mean, like I said, my hope is that we get a commercial solution that'll put us out of business, basically, because that's all anybody wants. It's not a competition. It's really the best solutions for people. And up until now, there weren't those solutions available. So, if people start switching to these commercial solutions, then that's great, and that's what we want. We will continue to support it for the foreseeable future.
Great. Someone is asking if there is a very basic video you could recommend for setting up NIGHTSCOUT.
I'd have to look for it. I'm not sure there is. Actually, Katie DeSimone, Google Katie DeSimone on YouTube, and she, I think, does have a NIGHTSCOUT setup video.
Yes, I think she does as well.
Yeah,
because I think I've watched it. Okay, this presentation mostly focused on Loop with iPhone. Is there any brief comments you can provide on Android APS? Pros and cons versus Loop.
So Android APS is a really, really solid solution. The only reason I don't talk about it that much in this presentation is because the pumps it uses, we don't have access to in Canada, unfortunately. But it is a really, really great solution. And they even have, where you can bolus from remotely. So that would be cool for people managing kids remotely and things like that. It is worth looking into if you have access to those devices and they're using Android.
Do you think that Tandem will eventually work with Spike or X-Strips, or just the approved algorithms? Or do you know if they're already using these for, say, their Control IQ that's working in the US?
So Spike and X-Strip are actually Dexcom, like the CGM replacement apps. So they wouldn't really, Tandem, it's not the algorithm portion, but no, I don't think they'll work with them. Unfortunately, I think their Dexcom partnership would prevent that, but I do think Tandem will be open to working with different algorithms in the future, which would be cool. So you could choose that pump, but with a different algorithm.
And just a follow-up question to the basal testing. Time frame wise, can you give an example? If you open Loop at 12, I don't know if that's 12 a.m. or p.m. and fast, then do you start looking at numbers, say, so that must be 12 a.m., like at 5 a.m. or how long, does it need to be? Mm-hmm.
I think you can start looking at them an hour in, because that sort of insulin has started working an hour in. But you can see, if there's a rise 2 hours in and it just keeps going up and up, that basal wasn't strong enough. When people start looping, we find generally their basals are not strong enough and their insulin sensitivity factor is too strong. So they need to reduce that or make it a bigger number so it's less aggressive, because Loop uses that information every 5 minutes to make a change. So if it's slightly off, it's multiplying that error every 5 minutes.
This is our last question. Is there any progress or hope of being able to use newer pumps for looping?
No. No. Unfortunately, there just isn't. The Dana pumps, hopefully if they come here, then they will be, there's Diaboloop and some other solutions, but the ones that currently, like the newer Medtronic ones, Medtronic did say they'd work with Tidepool, so there's maybe an option there, but not the classic Loop as we know it now.
Great. So Kate, I know you can't see it, but in the chat box, it's blowing up with kudos to you. And thank you for this presentation on behalf of Connected in Motion and all of our participants who joined the webinars this morning. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your expertise and talent with us. And just so everyone knows, this webinar, it has been recorded. So it will be available at another time. If there was any sections that you want to go back to and have another listen to, that will be available. Any of our presenters that have given us the okay to share slides, those will be available as well at the end of the conference weekend.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Bye.